was Maria. All right, cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to January 21st, 2020 edition of the MakerDAO Community Call. My name is David. I work doing community development here at Maker. And this call is a recurring call every Tuesday, and we use it for a couple things. We use it for getting everybody up to speed on what's been going on in the MakerDAO universe for the last week. As you know, if you follow crypto in general, let alone a specific project, things move really, really, really fast, and there's always interesting things happening. Especially in this kind of open source world that we live in here in crypto. But besides getting everybody up to date on what's been going on in the Maker universe, we also use this call to kind of explore the ecosystem, see interesting projects. We love having guests on, and we're trying to make this call a lot more interesting and kind of inclusive to the greater DeFi community mainly. So today we got Ryan Berkun. He is the CEO of Zer0Collateral. If you live on Twitter like many of us, you might have seen Zer0Collateral get some nice traction, get some nice publicity, because it's a really interesting concept. And I think that DeFi started off with kind of MakerDAO being the big gorilla in the room, but MakerDAO specializes in secured lending or secured credit. So like you're not borrowing based on your personal, I guess, credit worthiness or anything like that. You're actually putting up collateral that's worth something and you're borrowing against it. But in finance, there's a whole other side of lending, and it's under collateralized lending, and it's called unsecured lending, right? So it's lending either based on a person's credit worthiness. That's what credit cards do, right? They're one form of non-collateralized lending. And so it's been a really interesting thought experiment in our space, and a lot of people have been thinking about, how do we bring unsecured lending to the DeFi space? And Zer0Collateral has one of these approaches. So without further ado, I'm going to let Ryan introduce himself. He is here on the call with us.
Hey everyone, Ryan here from Zer0Collateral. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, David. I really appreciate it. On this high level, I guess, give a write-off on the vision and mission of Zer0Collateral. From a narrative, it's pretty simple. We see there's about 30,000 people in DeFi today. There's about 8 billion people in CeFi. And we want Zer0Collateral to be that bridge that can really open up the channels to bring the CeFi individuals into our DeFi space, and potentially without them even having to know or learn about DeFi. The way we see that is about almost all loans are by default zero collateral, outside of mortgages and car loans. And about 80% of people around the world owe debt. So there's a lot of people who have debt. It's about a $215 trillion market. And really, to bring these people into the world, we have to solve the question of how do you create an identity and bring that identity to an on-chain marketplace. We're doing that in a very unique way. For the past 6 months, we've been in stealth building out an infrastructure called Stratosphere. It's a decentralized cloud, and a CeFi plus DeFi bridge was really one of the first use cases that we thought of to bring the DeFi community out into the open. It ended up taking more traction than we even expected when releasing Zer0Collateral. V1 is live. We have an experiment running on mainnet. It's unaudited, so if you use it, please just be warned, be cautious. The V1 on chain right now, you build a credit history through successful payback of loans, and with each further loan you take out, you actually have less and less collateral requirements, and your interest rate also decreases. With the V2 that we're looking at, we truly want to bring in all these different CeFi sources, whether that's true credit scores or algorithmically created credit scores in a decentralized format, as well as risk model analysis to have a CeFi user come to the internet, say, hey, I connected my bank account or whatever, Venmo, Plaid, etc. account I use, say, give me a loan, internet, and DeFi, all they see is the internet, gives them a loan, and now they have more money. We think that'd be a magical moment for everyone and really bring the CeFi world into the DeFi space.
Yeah, definitely. So before we launch into kind of like you sharing your screen and going through the UI and going through that a little bit, can you tell me more about the like what exactly is Stratosphere and what is it like in relation to Zer0Collateral? Because Zer0Collateral is on Ethereum mainnet, and so in my brain it's not obvious what exactly Stratosphere
Yes.
is. Yeah.
So Stratosphere came at us trying to think of how do you create a modern application on blockchain. And it's pretty difficult to create anything that could scale to the size of Web2 companies. And it's just because the infrastructure designed today, all layer ones are solving a really hard problem, which is double spend. But a lot of applications and dApps think of like minimal decentralization and throw a lot of the rest of the application on the cloud. With building a C5 plus DeFi bridge, we didn't want to simply just be a front end that plugs into Plaid, your bank, Honey. We wanted a fully decentralized tech stack. Everything from the actual UI is decentralized all the way down to all the backend cloud events and computation. So Stratosphere itself is a decentralized cloud that runs on a consensus mechanism. For the full-fledged version, which is probably a year away, it'll be run on a Tendermint consensus testnet. But for Zer0Collateral, we're going to have pretty much permission nodes, secure companies around the world that are able to run, pretty much connect to a centralized cloud provider, and we can start decentralizing the cloud space. That enables us to plug in Plaid, CeFi, and even have open source risk analysis. Smart contracts can be written in Node or Python, and we can pull like huge computations distributed across these nodes in the cloud. And then the analysis gets spit out onto Ethereum. So the very small piece of data that can survive on Ethereum.
So basically, it's a side chain that enables all of the sort of supplementary functionality for this thing to really be decentralized. And at the
Yes.
end of the day, if you want to, I mean, it has to interface with like DAI and ETH
Yep.
at one level anyway. So the thing that we're seeing on chain is on chain, but everything else is facilitated by. Okay, I get it. That's cool. I like
Yes.
that a lot. That's awesome. So before I forget, anybody who's on the call, feel free to jump in. If you have a mic, jump in. Don't hesitate to interrupt. Also, if you don't have a mic, feel free to type your question in the chat. I'll happily pick it up and ask on your behalf to Ryan. But yeah, and also I'm gonna paste the link to the agenda, the public agenda for the call. So anything that's going to be talked about today is linked in there. So feel free to bookmark that link. It's going to have pretty much everything from all of the community calls in 2020 there. And so I already see that there's one question from Pedro C in the chat. It's asking any thoughts on using Zer0Collateral for UBI, Universal Basic Income initiatives. I think that's very kind of macro view, far out view.
We've been talking to Andrew Yang extensively about this.
Nice.
Just kidding. No, thus far we haven't because it's such a macro vision. But I think it would be incredible if we can in the DeFi space start thinking of how you could use under collateralized loans in a way to present UBI, whether that's through a staking model or other versions. One idea we do have is going after the payday loan industry and connecting with something like Sablier, such that you can have under collateralized loans and also have a streaming pay.
Right. So like the whole thing with Zer0Collateral and under collateralized loans is you have to establish some basis for the credit worthiness of the borrower, right? And you guys do it in this sort of incremental way where the like when an Ethereum address first uses your platform, they're able to borrow a sort of a very low amount at first. They could pay it back at any point. And my understanding is that these are kind of like payday loans in terms of like their the term. It's like a very short term loan. It's 30 days, and the borrow rate isn't like. And I'm kind of not understanding from the UI. Is it 4 to 12% a year, or is it 4 to 12% on the borrowed amount over 30 days?
So we've got a lot of feedback on this. Our V1 was really a short-term loan, and that percent is the percent for the loan specifically. What we're looking at is changing it to a flexible payback term. You pretty much set the term, and then there's an interest rate for the loan specifically.
Got it.
On that. Definitely want to extend that out to like probably the next version will be like a year.
Got it. So So Ryan, do you want to share your screen and kind of show us? I mean, it's pretty simple interface. I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary, but definitely feel free to run through it. And again, anybody on the call, feel free to ask some questions if you have them.
Awesome. Yeah, please interrupt me while I'm going through this demo. We tried to make this as simple as Uniswap is. Just you get to the screen, and if you read the tutorial, you kind of get how to lend and borrow. So right now, I'll show you the Ropsten version that we have live, just so it'll be processed quicker. On the left side, we have fake DAI that we created as a contract in Ropsten, and you can simply mint DAI to start playing with the actual interface. Once you approve the contract, you'll be able to start doing all the lending and borrowing. Right now, I have about 145 fake DAI, and about 45 of them are lended. I just lent these guys out. So over time, as loans are paid back, you'll see my interest in fake DAI actually increase. If I go through one of these processes, it's just how our smart contracts work. It's going to update the actual interest to be redeemed. So I'll refresh after this completes. And we should see that there will be more fake DAI sitting in the contract waiting for me to redeem it from the redemption pool. On the borrow side, we've tried designing this interface to be as simple as possible. I'll refresh this so you can see. Yep, so here it is.
It's 46 now.
There was some, oh yes, we now have 46 fake DAI outstanding, and there's some interest that is to be redeemed in fake DAI. That's because I recently paid back a borrow on the contract.
So quick question. So you can, so you withdraw interest versus your principal amount supplied separately?
Yes, so this was simply the design of V1. The reason is we do not have a consistent interest rate like Compound or the DSR. Because of the way the setup, borrows they start at different time periods, they get paid back at different time periods. There are potential defaults on the borrow, and at the default,
right,
is created. So we just wanted to separate it at the start.
I think that makes a lot of sense from the user side, because like if you're using this seriously, and if you're like a law-abiding user where like you're expecting to pay taxes on interest earned or anything, that actually solves a lot of your headache. So cool.
Awesome,
Right.
because we didn't even think of that piece, but you're completely right. Yes, 100%.
I mean, the other way around it is, you just go through all your deposits and then subtract whatever like your total balance is, and that's how you figure out your interest earned. So like it's not too bad, but the fact that it's separate, I think is kind of cool. I haven't seen that on any other UIs.
100% makes it simple. So this is the loan placement. Pretty much it goes through loan outstanding, when the loan is owed, the repay date, and the interest rate for that specific loan. We have two different types of collateral, and this is because we needed to incentivize people to put down the first 100% collateralization ratio. We have two types: redeemable, which is DAI that if you lend out, you can always redeem it. You can withdraw it at any time. And we also have non-redeemable collateral. The benefit to it, even though it can't be withdrawn, is you can lower your interest rate all the way down to 4%. We have two ways of lowering your interest rate. One is actually putting in this type of collateral, non-redeemable, and the other is simply by paying back loans. So I'll go through the process of putting this down and show you the difference.
Is it non-redeemable because it's like earmarked for borrowing elsewhere? So like somebody's borrowing your collateral at the same time, and it's just not liquid until they pay it back by the end of their term. Or what is the caveat with like non-redeemability?
So we're treating it almost as like a pay-in. You pay into the network.
Okay.
So like you pretty much bought the ability to have a lower interest rate, and it's almost like paying for that. And that thus you feel incentivized to actually get in now. We're thinking of doing something with like cosigners, of like a wallet contract on top of the main contract that you could like cosign and pretty much put down for someone else's collateral and get some interest paid back.
So also a question. You said there's two collateral, but I'm only seeing FDAI. What's the other collateral?
Oh no, the collateral forms. So it's not the actual type.
Okay.
Yes, I know the wording is very specific.
No,
so,
it's all good. I'm just asking questions kind of freely, because I feel I want to make it as clear for everybody watching, and also if I'm confused, there's like a non-zero chance that maybe a couple other people might be confused.
Yeah. Here I'll show you putting down, like asking for a borrow. So we paid back 2 borrows at this point, and you can see that if I want to borrow $10, the collateral I need is only $8.85.
Yeah.
I currently have $10 in collateral here, so I'll increase this until the collateral is just 10. It's like if I want to borrow 11, collateral need is that. Cool. I'll just borrow 11 DAI from the contract. Confirmed, and once this is confirmed, it'll update, and you'll see that the borrow outstanding has increased.
So this is a little tricky. It's interesting because you can technically borrow with zero collateral, but just very little, right? So because of just the size of the overall amount of DAI supplied, like it's because this is kind of like a beta version, like you're seeing these really small numbers. So if I really wanted to borrow with zero collateral, I'd only be able to borrow like a few DAI, right?
At the current time, but of course, once there's more supply in the
Yeah.
market, the goal is you can take out a loan somewhere between 1,000 to 30,000.
Right. But if you want to go higher, then you actually do have to supply not 100% of loan to value, but like 80% or 70%, some smaller amount of collateral, then you're actually borrowing.
Yes, yes.
Interesting. Okay.
So with our like full on V2 of connecting CeFi plus DeFi, the goal is that you don't have to ever supply anything.
Okay.
This guy's taking some time, but once it confirms, you'll be able to see this, and then I'll also show you how on payback the collateral needed will decrease. So let's see, I think the current is 8.5. Awesome. Here is the outstanding loan. So I borrowed 11 DAI. What I owe is 12.21, and that's at the interest rate of 11% on the repay date of these 30 days out, which is February 19th. As I said prior, we're looking to extend that to a very flexible model where you can say how many days up to 365 days. And we think that'll be really exciting because that'll give people the ability to really use this. We also want to see normal interest rates because we think we can truly disrupt the payday loan market. What we're thinking of is for like 2-week loans, something between like a 1 to 2% interest rate just for that loan. And that completely shifts the payday market on its head, where the payday market is currently at like 15 to 20% interest rates for a 2-week loan. So it's pretty crazy. And we feel that's like a prime opportunity for DeFi to come in.
So, let's talk about the situation where a borrower, you just borrowed 11 DAI, but you put up 10 DAI as collateral, which also in and of itself is kind of counterintuitive because you're paying like a percent on the 11, even though 10 of it is yours. Yeah, it's kind of funny. But even if you just borrowed one DAI, and you never paid it back, what happens? Because I read in your FAQs that there's a liquidation that happens. It's run on the wallet.
Yes.
I'm not really 100% sure what that means.
Okay. So the on-chain piece of V1 always starts at 100% collateralization. So on initiation, when I wanted to just borrow 10 DAI, I had to put in 10 DAI. If I simply ran away, the liquidation would occur and the 10 DAI would get sent to the pool, and the default pool, anyone could take it out. When I successfully pay back a loan like I just did, I paid back the 2.12.21. A portion of that goes into the redemption pool and a portion goes into the default pool. So on the next borrow, you're able to borrow the collateral you have in plus everything you've paid into the default pool. Mm-hmm. And thus you build up this credit history over time. From a macro standpoint, no one can ever leave the market with more than they put in. But we feel that it's a first step in getting past the over collateralization, and you get rewarded for successfully taking out and paying back a loan.
See, that's where conceptually I was a little lost. So now I'm understanding. So in order for you to really get access to zero collateral loans, you actually have to go through a handful of loans where you are collateralized, and then over time it just requires less and less of you based on payback history and all that kind of good stuff. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
exactly. And like I said with V2, the goal is you never have to do that. It's just simply ask for money and get money.
Right.
I'll show you another. Yeah, go for it.
So a liquidation happens. This means that whatever collateral that the wallet originally deposited is obviously seized. It's written that the interest rate gets reset. So I'm assuming that that's referencing the idea where if you are a regular customer of zero collateral, over time, as your creditworthiness is proven, your overall interest rates drop because the risk premium on you as a customer is deemed to be lower and lower with a track record. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
You can actually see that right now. If I want to borrow 10 FDI, the interest rate is only 10% now, since we've already paid back. So that's exactly what happens.
So in the test case, you'd paid back, and then the next time you'd borrow, you could borrow 20 DAI, and you'd be required to put in something like 17 DAI as collateral. Then you
Yes.
pay that back, and then the next time you'd be able to, let's say you want to borrow 50 DAI, you only have to put in 40 DAI as collateral, and it kind of grows from there. So what I'm seeing or thinking about is kind of like a chicken and egg problem. How do you expect to get larger borrowers if it requires this kind of front loading of a lot of different loans? Like, what if I don't have the time to go through like a 3-month period where I take like 10 loans from you guys that are very small amounts that require my time and my attention? Yeah, I see that as a really big obstacle to onboarding kind of lenders or borrowers at large.
Yes, and so did we. So we have about 4 solutions that we've brainstormed and are exploring.
Nice.
First one, NFT. So if you can take the credit history of loans paid back and pretty much plug it into an NFT, that data into NFT, you could buy someone else's good credit. And thus you could then borrow immediately under collateralized all through on-chain premises. That would just be a liquid market of NFTs, and you would just sell the reputation of your accounts. So that's one solution that we have. Second solution is cosigners. So the ability to have a smart contract on top of the main contract where someone else can deposit collateral on your behalf. And when you pay back interest, they get some portion of that, or you set up like a more specific like loan that they owe you.
That's cool.
Peer-to-peer matching. Third, we've outlined this in the one pager that we put out yesterday. Staking. We're looking at having some type of staking and slashing pool, similar in concept to how Synthetics is created, where you have actual like voting participation of stakers on approving or disapproving specific people from Web 2 on borrowing or not borrowing a loan. And if you vote to approve them and this person defaults, well then you get slashed, like the people in the pool get slashed. That's in exploratory phases. It's early days figuring out.
That sounds challenging with the absence of like real identity. That would make sense if you had like maybe a set of ETH addresses of like known people. Yeah.
So with the Stratosphere plugin, we're going to have full identity. We're thinking potentially not all the way down to names if we can keep privacy preserving piece of that. But imagine through Stratosphere, we can connect like Credit Karma or Experian, multiple sources that give you a FICO or credit score. And then we have the computation analysis go through the decentralized cloud. And then that little final piece of data, which is that like credit score, gets put onto a wallet. And now that wallet has a genuine credit score from CeFi. Or security features, et cetera, we're working out and being very cautious about. But that would actually give you a genuine credit score. And now we can create like real on-chain risk model.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I see. So like the part of the pitch of Zer0Collateral is bridging that CeFi to DeFi gap. And like naturally, I think it's I don't know, I'm obviously like speculating, but I think it's probably reasonable to assume that like, you know, the IRS, you know, Credit Karma, a lot of like these CeFi companies that are really important in our like traditional day-to-day lives, at least here, like in the US, are gonna be mapping user addresses to actual people, right?
Yes.
Like especially like the IRS, right? Like the IRS knows you have a Coinbase account, and Coinbase knows where you're withdrawing to. They're gonna know exactly which ETH address you are. So interesting. So and in that vein, actually, Akiva asked the question: would the implementation of the cosigner idea that you mentioned before require some regulation because of its similarity to credit default swaps? And in general, where do you see the like? Obviously, this is really early for you guys, but you guys will have to eventually kind of confront the regulatory dragon, right?
Yep. We, of course. So we actually had a handful of conversations about this while simply building out Stratosphere itself. Reason being, the nodes that are running the decentralized cloud connect to like AWS or Google Cloud or like Microsoft Azure, and they already have to deal with regulation in that sense because they don't want to get shut down by the cloud providers.
Right.
With that, we had developed out in the Zero Collateral in the Stratosphere white paper a governance model around this. And what we're thinking is having like very specific like banned or like flagged applications or pieces where you need like licenses if you're going to be that cloud node.
Right.
That the other really interesting piece is that cloud nodes are going to be all over the world. Thus, if you are running this in a geographic area that does not have specific regulations like the states do, this could be a decentralized like front end piece to the protocol if you, as a different project, write this cosigner agreement. So we see like the Zer0Collateral as this like very minimalistic, simple like base layer
Public
infrastructure to get a loan.
Yeah.
Yeah, public infrastructure, and there will be building blocks on top of it, specific to jurisdictions. We know that's like a big dragon and like something coming after everyone. So we know it's an ecosystem.
Cool.
piece.
Yeah. Thanks for answering. That's that's kind of the big question for everybody is how do you handle jurisdictional regulatory kind of requirements? Yeah, right on. Okay, cool. So maybe we have maybe another 5-6 minutes. Definitely get your questions in, guys, if you have them. But in the meantime, let me ask, uh I guess next 6 months? What does the next 6 months look like for Zer0Collateral in terms of development? What are you guys trying to achieve?
So I think it's twofold. One, we want to have our V1 fully audited and ready to go live and really start going into growth mode with V1. We have goals of money, how much money we want in the contracts, but I keep it internal for now. The other piece is we're going to be pretty hands-on in development of V2. Our goal is somewhere between 6 to 9 months out. An end user in CeFi can come to the internet, connect Plaid. What we would do through Stratosphere is download all their bank and spending and credit history, have some very open source analysis of how you can create an on-chain self-sovereign credit identity. And that will immediately plug into the staking pool. People can vote on the loan. And from the borrower standpoint, they just see new money in their.
So question about the establishing like a credit profile for borrowers. Are you guys going to be publishing anything publicly about that? How much like open source feedback and I guess research are you guys inviting to your own efforts?
It'll be pretty much all open source as we're developing. We just want to have some more concrete pieces on it. And the whole premise with Stratosphere was decentralizing that bridge, bringing CeFi to DeFi. So everything from the computation contracts to like the data being stored to like the actual thesis and research behind it, it'll all be open source. And we really want this to be a community-led project. So we're looking for people to join who are excited about this, who want to help on any front.
Right on. Cool. And I see Jalil asked, any Argent integration planned for lending?
If you are in contact with the Argent team, please let us know. We would love to be integrated.
So my understanding is that Zer0Collateral is going to be like a dApp that you could pretty much access through a browser wallet or like or just online from your desktop or a mobile wallet, right?
Yep.
So for Argent to integrate, it would probably be like not too hard, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, like when you guys have like a mainnet kind of proven thing, where because like I also noticed a lot of people are skeptical about the model,
Yep.
And so I think that a lot of critical thinking still has to be done because of course like it's hard to kind of cover all of the bases yourself. That's why open source is so powerful. It kind
Yep.
of forces you through the fire of real objective like critical thinking.
Yes, which is amazing because as a startup you can like get told what people want and people will help you make
And
that
what
happen.
you're doing wrong. Yeah.
In Web 2 you're kind of in your own world, so
Yeah.
it is great.
Cool. So yeah. Okay, cool. So how do I ask a question with Google Meet? So Robert, if you have a microphone, you could unmute yourself, or actually, yeah, I can't unmute you. But if you unmute yourself, you should be able to ask the question. Or if you want, you could type it, and I could ask it for you. The unmute button, if you're using a PC, should be right in the middle on the left side next to the hang up button. if you're using your phone.
How's it going, guys? Yeah, I appreciate the help with that.
All good, all good.
Just a quick question, Ryan. I love the site, did the alpha, and it's working really smoothly. Just wondering, so the credit profile is kind of the core of the DApp, as opposed to like a compound where it's like a trading, you put in a certain amount to get a certain amount out. So you're really looking to build like an on-chain credit profile is kind of what the core use case is here.
Yes, and that will extrapolate us to a very simple thing, which is an unsecured loan, which is pretty big in the macro sense.
Nice. Cool. All right. So if that is it, I want to thank you so much for coming on, Ryan. It was a super interesting call, and definitely looking forward to what you guys are going to do over the next year, pretty much.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having me on, and thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. And yeah, thank you everybody for coming, asking questions, and participating. So I'm gonna repost the agenda doc in the chat, and we're gonna get on to our usual programming. So I'm gonna share my screen just because I find that it might be a little bit more entertaining than just looking at me talking. So give me 1 second. Let me throw my screen up. Yeah, there we go. So I'll share this window. All right, cool. So we're going to go through just a handful of things. We're going to go through some governance stuff, partnership stuff. There's nothing from our official blog besides just governance stuff, so nothing there. We're going to go through some highlights from the community, and I'll cover some real-life events. And then finally, I'm going to do this one portion of the call where I want to single out a system, like a piece of the MakerDAO or the Maker protocols, like smart contracts, or a mechanism in there. And I want to explore it a little bit because every week I see people are curious about specifics of the system. And I think it would be kind of cool just to pick one and spend 5 to 10 minutes talking about it towards the end of the call if there's time. So with regards to governance, here's a couple of things that have happened. Actually, you know what? Before I jump into governance, let's just do a really quick snapshot of the numbers right now of the Maker protocol. So we actually saw a huge jump in total DAI supply this week. We're up to 98 million, which is really, really, really awesome to see. Psi is also dropping down from 35 million earlier this week. And it looks like we are maintaining a healthy amount of DAI in the migration contract. So anybody who has a CDP in the old system in single collateral DAI definitely has the ability to migrate, unless you're like, you know, 3088 and the other really, really large guy. So Christian is asking, are we gonna run into ceiling issues? And I'm gonna talk about that in a second because we're actually voting on it right over here. Yeah. So one of the votes, one of the governance polls that's going on this week is debt ceiling adjustments, and I'll cover that in a second. So now we can talk about governance. This week we saw the executive vote that started on January 16th, which was last Thursday. We saw it pass. So on January 20th, it passed, and there was only one parameter change, and it was first the single collateral DAI ETH CDP. The stability fee was raised from 5% to 9%. And this was interesting because for the last, I'd say, like month or two, or really since migration, our public governance community, made the decision to keep the spread either negative compared to DSR or zero for the sake of not being predatory towards Psi users. And a good 2 months has passed, and if you were a Psi user or a market maker, you were able to create Psi for 5%, and the DSR has been sitting at 6% for quite some time. And before it was 6%, it was 4%, and the stability fee for single collateral DAI was, I think, 3%, if I'm not mistaken. So for the first couple months of migration, maker governors wanted to make sure that there was kind of no constraint, that there was freedom for people to migrate from one system to the other. I also want to point out that the public sort of consensus in the Maker community around whether they want to keep single collateral DAI around is very much like a no, because a lot of people who are Psi users were wondering, hey, like I don't want to convert my Psi to DAI. I want to use Psi because I want it to be backed by only ETH. I don't want to, there's kind of a lot of that kind of conversation going around. But the reality of the situation is that MKR governors have a certain amount of resources they're able to, expend in terms of governing the Maker protocol. And governing two protocols is a huge amount of overhead, and actually takes away from the resources that MKR governors are able to use specifically for the MCD version, for growth, for doing things like maker improvement proposals, et cetera, et cetera. So from the start, I think there's been pretty like very strong consensus. Sorry, around the idea that single collateral DAI will be deprecated. Uh, and if somebody really wants single collateral DAI to exist, they're free to launch the smart contracts themselves and relaunch on their own. Uh, but nevertheless, at the moment, this week we saw the stability fee being raised from 5% to 9%. So now it's actually 3% more expensive to create Psi than it is to create DAI. So this is already beginning to incentivize Psi users to either migrate or to uh, yeah to borrow elsewhere, because really this affects just the borrowers, not actual Psi users. So if you're a CDP user, you're incentivized now to move your borrowing to DAI or to close out your CDP, which uh, makes sense unless you are willing to sit through emergency shutdown. And the current state of conversation around emergency shutdown, I'll get into in a little bit. Uh, yeah, so I'll get into that in a little bit. So that's it for the executive vote that passed and just the context around it. There is no executive vote currently. So right now, there's only a cycle of governance polls that are happening. The governance polls that are happening are the Psi stability fee adjustment, which is a weekly poll, uh, the DAI stability fee adjustment, which affects both ETH and BAT CDPs, and then the debt ceiling adjustments, which is not a regular vote, but it is here this week because of the proximity of the supply DAI from ETH to the ETH debt ceiling. There's only about 4 million of runway left. And then BAT is kind of inconsequential. It's like super small, and we're not seeing a huge demand for BAT borrowing, so it's left out of the debt ceiling vote this week. So the debt ceiling vote this week is number one, to lower the Psi debt ceiling by 25 million. So currently, it's sitting at I think 80 million. Yeah, that's right. No, 70 million. Yeah, math is hard for my brain. I thought it's Tuesday at 1 p.m. apparently. So it's to lower the side debt ceiling from 45 million to 25 million, further shrinking that version of the Maker protocol, and then simultaneously to raise the DAI from ETH debt ceiling from 100 to 125. So I believe the voter breakdown takes a million years to load. So, but I'm fairly certain that these 15 unique voters are voting yes. At least that's what I saw yesterday when I myself voted. So yeah, that's the current landscape of voting. There's a handful of governance polls, and these governance polls are going to inform the executive vote that is going to go live on Friday the 24th. So depending on all of these, Friday the 24th, we're going to see one rolled up executive vote for all of these changes. And if you're interested in the ranges, I'm not going to go over them here, but you can go. I mean, you're watching the video, so you can, I guess, actually see the ranges are all over here, and the dates for the votes, beginning and end, are here. Uh, and also, just for a little bit of additional context, if you're not familiar with how Maker governance voting works, there's two different ones. There's governance polls and executive votes. Polls are time-based. They're meant to gather the signal from MKR holders while executive votes actually execute changes into the system, and they happen through this model called continuous approval voting. And basically what it means is, this is the previous proposal that already passed, and you can see that there's 52,000 MKR staked on it, just hanging in here, defending the proposal. So for the next executive vote to pass, it actually never really expires. The only thing that happens is it either becomes dead in the water and forgotten, or it passes. And for it to pass, uh, it has to beat the previous status quo proposal, and then you're able to execute and move that to become the new status quo proposal that's guarding the system. So right now, for any change to really happen, it has to beat a 52,000 MKR threshold, uh, which is relatively low, because we actually saw a few weeks ago somewhere between 100 and 200,000 MKR actually defending the system. And I say defending because if you have this much MKR or more, you very well could pass things yourself. And so it's in MKR holders' best interest to actually incentivize and hold your MKR in the current status quo proposal, so that unwarranted changes aren't made in general.
David, can I ask you a
Yes,
question about this voting?
absolutely.
You think the system I made up right now, you think it's working right? You think the maker token holders actually give too much credit to this? How much they're voting? Yes, I know there was last time was a couple of weeks ago was 100 to 200,000. But what's your average usually? What's these maker token holders? You think they would need to be more incentivized or other way to make it much more more people to vote on these things? Because I know you guys doing a good job and you guys all, but it seems to me that is the maker token holders, most of them don't give a shit what's going on. I mean, you guys voted for from the MCD, you got bets as your other one, but how many people actually using it? You show that on there that it's not too many people actually
yeah, so I could get into a little bit about that. So the first thing to understand is, there's a million MKR tokens, and the current number of MKR inside of the actual contract, like inside of the voting contract across all the addresses, I think that's right here. Yeah, it's 202,000 MKR. So that 20% of the total supply is sitting in the voting contract, but not all of it is actively voting. So like you'll see weeks where, it'll be 150,000. You'll see weeks where it's 60,000 that are active, right? But the total number in the voting contract itself is around 20% of all MKR. The actual, and by the way, if you're interested in what's on the screen right now, this is a governance dashboard portal, dashboard, like system statistics made by the guys at Protofire, and they're doing really awesome work. So this is actually coming straight from our community. If you're curious about the voter turnout over maybe the last, let's just look at the last executed votes, right? So these are the current numbers I see. Yeah. I really wish they had like the historic number. Oh, actually, they do. Cool. So if we go to, let's say, this one that passed on, let's do the early year. I think that this was like one with a significant amount of MKR. Yeah, there was around 85,000 MKR here. And then it left to obviously go support like some other proposal. Oh, wait a second. Am I?
So David, that's what I was saying about the
Sure.
only 20% of the voter, maker the
Yeah.
tokens voting. I mean,
Yes.
20% is very,
Yes.
small amount. Show me a
It's
little bit.
actually much higher than you realize. If you look at Coca-Cola shares as an example, if you
All right.
control 5% of Coca-Cola, you actually can just about get any vote done via proxy, because almost nobody votes in publicly traded shares.
Right. So, but you're comparing apple and oranges. We're not talking about a publicly stated stock. We're talking about a DeFi that 20% should be a little bit higher. I would think a little bit higher to get something.
I agree with you, Peter, in the sentiment of yes, there should be more MKR voting, and I think that as a community, the community is very focused on making improvements to the voting process, making improvements to the UI. We have a ton of contributors in our community that are doing things like onboarding guides. We actually just released a voter onboarding guide about like right before the new year. So we are serious about incentivizing people to vote, but I don't think it's and actually, yeah, literally repeating what Aaron's saying. I don't think it's apples and oranges. It's human behavior because look, if you are a speculator who has a portfolio of crypto, you have some Bitcoin, you have some ETH, and you have like a swarm of like these alternative tokens. Uh, one of them being MKR. Like you might not spend so much time personally in voting or participating in the system, but the 20% of MKR that is reflecting that group of MKR investors that is active, that are the most passionate and incentivize people to do work on the protocol. But yeah, I think it's human behavior. I think that you'll always have some amount of people and probably a majority of people on the sidelines not doing anything. Uh, but yeah, to your original question, is this broken? No. Is this not optimal? I don't think it's optimal, but it's we're in a process of iterating and kind of getting to a place where we're making things better and better over time. Has it worked so far? Yes, it's been working so far. Uh, it's actually been working marvelously so far. But yeah, there's tons of improvements to be made. But another thing to keep in mind is that ultimately, the Maker protocol is not like a representative democracy or anything like that. It's very explicitly a plutocracy. If you have MKR and you have significant amounts of your own capital invested in this, you have skin in the game, you have influence in the system, you're able to vote. So the game theory works out so that if yeah, it works out so that if you're an owner and you're interested in getting this thing to be managed properly, you're gonna be voting or delegating your vote to somebody who's responsible eventually, right? When delegated voting happens. So yeah, I don't think things are so bad. I'm actually super hopeful about maker governance.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not, David. Don't misunderstand. Don't misunderstand. I don't think
okay.
it's broken. I'm just
Yeah.
asking. You guys talking about Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola been around for 100 years, and you have millions of people holding it. And if he's not holding it personally, they're holding their 401k when somebody can speak for them. And he's talking about, this is a small, we are still a small, I know MakerDAO, DeFi is growing, and that's which is fantastic, and you guys are leading of it. So just for something like that, for 20% to make some kind of decision on it to, lower or higher the thing, I think should be a little bit high. But let's leave it at that. But it's not saying that it's broken. I'm just a little bit higher than someone like 20% of Maker.
Yeah, I hear you, Peter. Don't worry. I know you're I know you're a Maker fan, man. Don't worry. I'm just I'm just defending. I'm just defending. But don't worry. I totally get your sentiment, and I think that our greater Maker community, like governance community, is very intentionally thinking about ways to increase that number of active voters. So yeah, let's leave it there. Cool. So moving forward, if you're interested in reading about like any of the current conversations in governance, which there are a lot, I could actually really quickly run through this. This is a thread on our forum that's upkept by one of our community members, Long for Wisdom, total rock star. But as you could see, you could drop in here. It's updated every week, and you could see some of the conversations going on. So if you have any personal insight into any of these, definitely participate. So you could see some of the active discussions. I'll read through them. But there's a conversation about MakerDAO needing a treasury to provide compensation not only to workers but also to various things like governance facilitate. Yeah, basically work. But it's supposed to be able to pay for its own overhead. How do we do this? What's the mechanism? And so there's some conversation going on in there. And then there's a couple of threads about global settlement for single collateral DAI. So this thread actually, Derek Flossman, who's doing governance product stuff at Maker, he took some of the signal request threads around this about the parameters for single collateral DAI shutdown, and he kind of summarized them and refreshed the conversation. So if you guys are curious about what the current state of conversation around that is, run through that. But generally speaking, people are thinking in two ways: either to set a hard date 3 to 6 months out in the future, or to set a date out, I think, a month or two after we reach a certain supply of Psi. I can't remember exactly, so don't quote me on that, but definitely check it out if you're curious. And maybe next call, since we have only about 10 minutes, I can get into this if you guys are curious. Then there's a little bit of the community kind of trying to understand certain things. So, why is the stability fee equal to the DSR? Brings that back. Then there's a DAI supply projection poll. And then there's all of these threads called signal request threads. And this is actually, you don't have to be an MKR holder to participate in these. You just have to be a forum, like signed up on the forum and active. But it's trying to gather signal around kind of smaller questions in our governance process. So, like, should Maker make a treasury to manage revenue? Should we replace the weekly DSR poll with a DSR spread poll, which actually that's currently on chain? Oh no, not mean to click that. And then how do we handle executive bundling in relation to technical changes? So, like, some of the changes we make are monetary policy changes, like interest rate changes. And then other changes we make are like, smart contract fixes, like what happened a few months ago with the voting contract. So how do we handle that? Do we bundle them? Do we keep them separate? There's a lot of nuance. And then again, some summary around the SCD shutdown parameters. And I think this is actually a summary of the two signal request threads that happened last week. So as you could see, many people voted for a shutdown to begin on a specific date rather than like a shutdown based on the peg or a shutdown based on a certain supply. So 41% versus 37%, right? Like, but these two are kind of the leading options. Yeah, both date and supply, and this was like a later signal thread, if I'm not mistaken, that was run. Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah. I think this just dives into all of the signal threads regarding emergency shutdown. So you could see that our governance community is doing a lot of critical thought around how to do it correctly without, hurting our users, both CDP users and Psi users, and trying to figure out the best way to handle this kind of thing. Yeah. So let me go back here and quickly run through the other stuff I got. Yeah, so definitely check that out. Some partnerships. We saw Status's dap.ps dap browser website thing. They added Oasis and Zerion, which is really cool. I also saw this morning Ethic Hub welcomes DAI onto their platform. I actually don't know what Ethic Hub does as a platform because I didn't spend too much time reading about them today. But yeah, just a couple of partnerships integrations. Feel free to look into them yourselves. Yeah, some highlights from the community. Actually, yeah, this is a section I really want to get into because a couple cool things happened. Makerburn.com got some additional stats pages. So, before we have, Mariano Conti's DAI stats, which is amazing. And Makerburn used to just be used for checking out, MKR burn stability fees coming in and all that. But they added these few tabs, which are really cool, and they have this tab, which has a lot of the DAI stats data, or really the Maker protocol data, just displayed a little differently. So you could see some upgrades being made in the community. That's really fun. We also saw, so for anybody coming to ETH Denver in February, we see the Burner Factory guys actually created the Burner Factory wallet, so you can create your own ERC20 token from it. There's a ton of really cool functionality with this new burner that you guys, yeah, click on this and read about it because compared to last year's burner wallet, this thing is like, one order of magnitude cooler. Yeah. So not only has Maker Burn got an update, DAI Stats also got an update. So there's a little Darth Vader up here, and you can just click him, and all of a sudden, it becomes aesthetically more pleasing. But yeah, so that's another little update, and I think some updates in the future, if you guys are curious. Soon, Mariano and Chris or whoever's working on it, they're going to create a couple of buttons. One is to burn MKR in the burner, and the other one is to square these two numbers through this function called heal. So anybody can actually call it, and it actually like squares this out. So it subtracts the system debt from the system surplus, which several I think a couple different user types are incentivized to do this. But having a button here just for the casual observer, it's kind of fun too. So I think they're working on that. Yeah, another cool thing that happened this week is our trees. So Victor Rodfelt is actually going to be here on next week's community call. So if you're interested in like checking out our trees, you don't have to listen to me now. You could just come next week and ask him yourself. And then the Masendo guys actually did a walkthrough video of it already. So yeah, check it out here if you're interested. Another thing, Axie Infinity, the community alpha is live, and I think they even did like a competition where some of the prize pool was in DAI. So definitely check it out if you're into blockchain gaming. I'm really excited for DAI to become kind of the de facto blockchain gaming cryptocurrency. And Axie Infinity is a really cool example of it, especially since their game produces things like NFTs and collectibles, and yeah, it's really really cool stuff. Check it out. All right, some articles. Yeah, protocol politicians, quoting straight from Rich Brown, a look at the future crypto politics of MakerDAO and the DAI stablecoin. So actually, while I was preparing, I was trying to like capture like the few different categories that they did for these politicians, but it was a really cool like think piece on the different types of potential politicians: collateralists, ETH maximalists, technics, cosmopolitan. Yeah, a lot of cool like original thoughts. So I definitely give credit to the author for doing some cool thinking around it. But yeah, eventually delegated voting is going to happen, and it's going to be really interesting to see kind of public faces try to take responsibility and take stances and try to uh, accumulate influence over the protocol through being public protocol politicians. So that's a really cool think piece. We also saw I forgot who wrote this. Somebody I should know. I should know by name by now. Oh yeah, Tom Schmidt from Dragonfly Capital wrote this really cool article on liquidators, the secret whales helping DeFi function. So this liquidators actually fall into this kind of category of users called keepers, and they perform really important functions like participating in auctions and collateral auctions and several other things throughout DeFi. Definitely check that out if you're interested. And then lastly, for the articles, this was a cool little feature on 5 Ethereum DeFi apps revolutionizing savings. So they talked about Compound, Pool Together, the DSR, and I forgot the other couple. I think Archeries was even in there. But regardless, yeah, check them out if you're interested. Yeah, couple minutes. I know I'm a minute over, but really quickly, a few things came out in terms of videos and podcasts. Pool Together was on Unconfirmed, which was really fun to listen to. There was a Turkish explainer video about MakerDAO and Oasis came out. So if you or any loved ones don't know English and just know Turkish, you could send this to them, and they could learn about how MakerDAO and Oasis work. And then lastly, this was a really cool short, like 3-minute video from Tom from Mosendo. So he recently raised some dies for orphans in Vietnam, and this guy has an apartment in Saigon. So he, physically came through and like gave out a bunch of food to an old people home, and like it's really cool to see this philanthropic stuff happening with the donations that are gathered through the DeFi crowd. So this was really cool to watch this morning. I guess we're not gonna have time for the system segment of the week, unfortunately, but I did link it here, so you could read about it if you'd like. And yeah, for real life events, just click on the agenda and you guys could read about them. But the short of it is we're going to be in Madrid, Tokyo, and Davos over the next 2 days. And Rune is going to be speaking in Davos. Kathleen is going to be in Tokyo. Petru is going to be speaking in Madrid. So yeah, that's about it for the week. For those of you that are still here, And actually, maybe I can. Feel free to head out, but I'm gonna really quickly talk about surplus auctions and auctions in general. Thank you so much, Robert. Yeah, this was a really great call. So thank you guys for coming. Definitely join us next week for our trees. And if you guys are interested in being a guest, or if you know any projects that you'd want to see come on as a guest, do a demo, some live Q&A, shoot me a message and or put me in touch with them. I'm always looking for cool ways to make this call more valuable for you guys. So yeah, thank you for coming. And then I guess for the last few minutes, even if everybody leaves, I'm gonna quickly talk about the surplus auctions.
David, I need to go because I have another call.
Go. I'll see you, Maria. Take care.
Bye.
So, so if you're curious about auctions in MakerDAO, it's actually important to know that there's a huge difference between single collateral DAI, how single collateral DAI worked with regards to liquidation, how it worked with regards to stability fees and burning MKR, compared to multi-collateral DAI. So multi-collateral DAI actually introduced a whole new sort of suite of functionality to help with these processes that improved on these processes. And one of these kind of areas is auctions. So single collateral DAI didn't have auctions. So when it would liquidate CDPs, they would go to kind of a direct discounted sale. So it wouldn't be an auction, it'd just be a flat 3% discount on collateral sold. And then for stability fees, they would be automatically converted into MKR or directly paid in MKR and sent to a burner wallet. So they weren't, yeah. So the stability fees were paid in MKR essentially. In multi-collateral DAI, it's a little different. For liquidated vaults, they go through an auction mechanism where it's called a. Actually, I might as well share my screen really quick because I'm on the page anyway. Yeah, here it is. So, so this thing happens when a vault gets liquidated, called a collateral auction. So the winning bidder pays DAI for collateral from a liquidated vault, and the DAI received is used to cover the outstanding debt. And obviously that includes covering the liquidation penalty for our vault that is underwater or liquidated. But yeah, so there's a collateral auction where bidders bid in DAI. And then on the other side of it, for stability fees are actually paid in DAI, and they actually now accrue continuously on a vault owner's balance. So they're constantly being collected as opposed to single collateral DAI, where they used to be collected discreetly. So the stability fees would be paid at the time that people paid back their portion of their balances, right? The stability fee would be paid sort of pro rata at the time when people would be paying back their balances. But in multi-collateral DAI, the stability fee is just constantly being added to your DAI balance. And this thing happens where, all of these stability fees being accrued contribute to the system surplus number right here. And in the system, there's a parameter called the surplus buffer, where once this number hits the surplus buffer, every amount over it, at the moment, there's another parameter. I think I actually forget exactly what it's called off the top of my head right now. Oh no, yeah, hold on, the auctions. Yeah, let me just put these together. So there's another parameter that basically says anytime you go over this by X amount. At the moment, it's 10,000. So anytime this number hits 510,000, 10,000 of the MKR is gonna, 10,000 of the DAI system surplus is gonna go towards this thing called a surplus auction. And a surplus auction is where the winning bidder has to actually bid in MKR for the DAI. So there's 10,000 DAI being sold. You have to bid in it for with MKR. And that MKR, once the auction completes, MKR is received, the 10,000 DAI is dispersed, that MKR is burnt. And so, yeah, it's a slightly different mechanism to facilitate the same idea of burning MKR. And yeah, and then the last auction that is part of this this whole domain of the protocol is called a debt auction. And the debt auction pretty much happens when, if I'm not mistaken, the debt buffer is reached. But I'm not actually, yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe Ed, you could help me clarify this, but I'm not sure if this actually has to be at 0 and this has to be 50,000, or if this could be 500 and as soon as this hits 50, it actually launches into a debt auction. But
so once that limit is exceeded, the open source auction keeper is actually coded to call the heal that you mentioned earlier. That'll reconcile any surplus against the debt.
Yeah.
So that'll actually automatically bring the surplus down to 0 at that point.
Right, or 450 and then 4 and then 350 and then 3. So it'll progressively get it down to 0 if we're running at a deficit, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And
so then
once the surplus remains 0, it'll be able to initiate one of those auctions.
Right. And so the debt auction specifically is where MKR gets issued and then essentially auctioned off to keep the system solvent. So, so the winning bidders pay DAI for MKR to cover the outstanding debt that collateral auctions haven't been able to cover. So MKR is minted by the system, and it actually increases the amount of MKR that is in circulation, which currently is down from 1 million at 988K because a bunch has been burned as a result of stability fees. So yeah, that's pretty much the idea. Whenever there's a system deficit, this, the lender of last resort is the MKR holder, and MKR is minted and sold in order to keep the system solvent. And those are the ideas for the 3 different auctions in the auction side of the protocol. So yeah, I hope that was interesting to you guys. If you want to read more in depth around the parameters and like kind of the details around each of these auctions, you could check out our really great developer portal, docs.makerdao.com, and I linked specifically to the page that talks about auctions. So yeah, thanks for hanging out for an extra 6 or 7 minutes. I hope this was informative and educational. And if you guys have a request for another part of the system you'd like me to cover, shoot me a DM or write it on Reddit when I post next week's thread about the call. I usually post it the day before, and I could definitely talk a little bit more about other parts of the system. So yeah, thank you guys, and I am hitting the record button so it stops recording. And for those of you sitting at home, thank you for watching. Hope this was good.
Thanks, David.